So I just hit 1 year on the Honda Monkey, and on the same day I hit 1,000 miles. And actually on that same day I also got my first citation on the bike. My buddy and I were riding around some trails near the house. We thought that it was okay to have bikes out on that trail, and we were riding for quite a while, and I think just got really unlucky. We came out into a clearing and there just happened to be a sheriff hanging out there that arrived on boat. So pretty unfortunate, both because one, I got a citation that I need to pay for, but two, those were fun trails to ride, so we need to find some other trails that we're allowed to be out on. But again, having now spent a full year with the bike, I thought I'd just briefly go over some of the modifications that I put on and what some of my thoughts are if I had the opportunity to do it again. I think for anybody that's looking to pick up power on this bike, the three things, or maybe I'll call it four, that were most valuable were the intake, the exhaust, and the cam. So I've got the M-Take intake from Man in the Box, and I think it works well. Chimera now also makes one, and DNA now has some strange dual filter intake for the Monkey that I'm interested in, but it's particularly expensive. I've got the Yoshimura RS3 exhaust, and I have the TV Parts cam with the Cameron Jones Racing tuned ECU, and those four items together picked up a lot of power for the bike. I guess maybe I'll call it five, because at the same time I put in that 14-tooth front sprocket to give me that bottom end torque, so that the cam that's making power at the top end kind of evened out the power band all around. A lot of the other modifications since then, though, have been to accommodate for other things that I'm doing. So the Katako clutch cover and the oil cooler were to be able to get more cooling for the engine once I went with the big bore kit. If you followed the other videos, I started with the 143 kit, which didn't work out too well, but I now have the 181 kit that I'm breaking in. If I were to do it again, I would have gone straight to the 181 kit. I think I was kind of intimidated by that, but at this point I realized that the install and the break-in is the same, and so far feels much more torquey than the 143 kit did. One thing that I would do differently, and again, you don't need to unless you're going with a big bore kit, but from an engine management perspective, I started off with the Dynojet products, the Power Commander 5 and their Wideband Commander 2 module. I only had that in the bike for a couple of 100 miles, and actually in the end I think the reason that my 143 kit failed was because I was using the Cameron Jones Racing tuned ECU piggybacked into my Power Commander 5. There was advanced timing on that ECU tune that I didn't realize, and that advanced timing I think caused early detonation, which is what destroyed the 143 kit. But I switched to the A-Racer engine management system, and that's a much more user-friendly interface. It has a great displays, so all the information that I'm looking for, AFR, RPM, engine temperature are displayed at once, and the auto-tune function and all of the other functions are much more easy to use than they are on the Dynojet product. And also, since it's a complete standalone engine management system, I don't have the stock ECU fighting with the A-Racer in any way. It's all up to the A-Racer to control the engines. So really happy with the way that it works. Again, I wish that I hadn't bought all those Dynojet products first, because I think that was kind of a waste of money. And if I were to do it again with the big bore setup, would have gone straight to the A-Racer setup that I have now. The only two issues that I've had with the A-Racer so far, one is that my COSO temperature gauge, which I previously had on the handlebar mount, stopped working correctly. I think the impedance on the A-Racer is different than the stock setup, and because of that, the reading coming off of the engine for the COSO suddenly went way down. It was reading like half of what it should be. But it doesn't really matter. I purchased a new mount that allows me to have my phone up here all of the time, so that freed up the space to get the phone up there, which is where I need all the readings for the A-Racer anyway. And the A-Racer displays the temperature anyway, so it would have been redundant. The other thing that doesn't seem to be working for me on the A-Racer is that it has a calibration setting to make adjustments to the speedometer readout. But for some reason, as much as I've played with it, it doesn't seem to actually be adjusting. So I've gone ahead and left the 12 O'Clock Labs Speedo Healer that I had in the bike originally, and that seems to be playing just fine with the A-Racer. So the two problems that I do have with it are things that I've been able to work around easily, and again, I'm really enjoying the A-Racer setup. But of all the modifications I've made, I think it's really only that once I went to the big bore kit, I would have started with the A-Racer setup and also would have gone straight to the 181 big bore kit. But other than that, all of the other modifications I've been really happy with. Aesthetically, the only thing that I've changed recently, I did take off the carbon fiber headlight shroud that I had on the bike for quite a while. I remember when I first saw the Honda Monkey modified, I think it was probably a Katako or a G-Craft that had that headlight cover on it, and I thought it looked pretty awesome, and I enjoyed having it for a while, but kind of grew tired of it. So when I pulled off the headlight shroud, it still had this chrome bezel around the headlight, so I had that powder coated a semi-gloss black, and I think that really ties it together pretty well. Aesthetics aside, other modifications that I've made include this Taiga rear set. I like it quite a bit. I like the riding position that it puts you in. It feels a little bit more like a sports bike than a cruiser. The pegs are also a lot higher, so coming around corners I don't have to worry about scraping them. On the original pegs, they do have springs, so they come up if you touch the road as you're coming around a corner, but it's just such a disconcerting feeling, so really happy not to have to be concerned with that anymore. Same with the handlebars. I have slightly lower handlebars in stock, which puts me a little further forward, but is just a more comfortable riding position for me, and also I like the way that looks a little bit more than the stock chrome handlebars that came up pretty high. Tire-wise, I've got the stock tires back on now. For a while I was running this Michelin Power Pure tire, which was a really good tire. I only probably put 100 miles, if that, on these. But there's two reasons why I switched back. One is because the tread on these Michelins were really just for the street, so going out on trails didn't have nearly the grip that the stock tires do. Not that the stock tires are great off-road tires, but they're somewhat of a compromise between a street tire and a real off-road tire. The other thing is the height of these tires were only 70, whereas the stock ones are 80, and I think the 80s just kind of fill out the bike a little bit better. So for a multitude of reasons, I went back to the stock tires, but I also have these if I ever go out onto a track or start spending more time on the street than I do on the trails. The other big change is the seat. I've gone through a couple of them. I had the Kataka one, which was completely uncomfortable, and I only had that for a very short amount of time. The stock seat, I still throw it on when I go out on the trails just because it's so comfortable and soft. It honestly doesn't feel like you even need suspension if you have that seat on. But just for riding around town and general use, I keep this DeRazor tracker seat on. I like the way that it looks. It feels real comfortable. It also brings me a little bit lower. I'm not particularly tall, so very easy to flat foot with this on. And just from my personal perspective, kind of brings the aesthetic of the bike together pretty well. But overall, I'm still loving this bike, and it's my go-to bike for running around town and quick errands. My wife this weekend's at one of the motorcycle MSF courses, so hopefully by the end of today she'll have a motorcycle license, and I expect she'll be looking to ride this bike a little bit more often. And with her now having a motorcycle license also opens up the opportunity for me to buy some more bikes and use her as an excuse. So as far as future modifications, there are still a few things that I'm planning to do. I am going to change the instrument cluster. Takagawa came out with a standalone instrument cluster that entirely replaces the stock Honda one. The Honda one, aside from not showing you much information, has that weird reflective LCD, and in sunlight it's almost impossible to see. It's also small, and I've just never liked it at all, so really excited to get that replaced. I have that on order from Japan. It should be here in the next week or so. Beside that, I'm looking to get the 181 kit completely broken in. I only have about 60 miles on it, so not enough yet for me to really be cranking it up. I did adjust the RPM limit to 8,000 through the A-Racer setup, but I don't plan to actually take it up to the 10,000 until I get about 200 miles on it. And after it's all broken in, I plan to dyno it to see how much power I did pick up from the 181 kit over the 125 that I had dynoed last time. So I wanted to again just thank everybody for all their viewership and all the comments that they've made throughout this build process, both in this series and some of my other bikes that I've been working on in the garage. Please stay tuned for more videos on this bike. Thanks.